It's the Week 12 pre-show. Carson Fox with you here to talk about the Baylor Bears, who are 5-4 overall, 3-3 in conference play, at our beloved West Virginia Mountaineers, who are also 5-4 but 4-2 conference play. A 4 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff from Milan Pushkar Stadium in Morgantown, West Virginia. It is the Military Appreciation Game, so hence why I'm wearing a Military Appreciation West Virginia shirt. So awesome. Love that. And I love that West Virginia has made this an annual tradition across multiple sports. I think, or at least all of them do something to some extent. So love that. ESPN2, the betting odds for this game as of this video's recording, Baylor is actually the road favorite at 2.5 points in this spread, a 58.5 over under. The ESPN matchup predictor, though, does like West Virginia's chances, gives them the favorable odds at 52.7%. So for today's episode, I want to talk about the matchup history, as I always do, what's on the line for both teams. We'll talk about weather, injuries, what to watch for when Baylor has the ball, what to watch for from West Virginia has the ball, special teams breakdown, as you know I love to do, and we have an interesting one, at least from Baylor's side this game, and then give you my 3 keys to victory and get you out with a final score prediction. So talking about this matchup, West Virginia leads the all-time series with 8 wins to 4 losses. West Virginia has never lost the game in Morgantown, so all of the even years dating back to 2012, a game that I was fortunate enough to be in attendance of, and a game that's still, man, you can't, having been there, you can't forget that. You cannot forget that Geno Smith game with Stedman Bailey, Tavon Austin, 70-63. What an incredible game that was back in 2012. And it's been a fascinating series. I wrote an article for WVNation.com years ago saying that, I think this was in 2018, that it was emerging that Baylor was becoming West Virginia's rival, it seemed like, in the Big 12 Conference, despite being Morgantown to Waco away on a map. But in 7 times in this series, the game has been decided by 7 or fewer points. In 4 of those contests, again 12, the game has been decided by 24 points or more on the scoreboard. And last year was another wacky one, 34-31 in a cold and wet Waco, Texas on November 25th, the final regular season game for both teams. West Virginia scored easily on its first offensive series. Can remember that shot play to Traylon Ray. Then gave up 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns to Baylor running back Richard Reese, keeping the Bears in the ball game. Then in the second half, West Virginia penalties and Baylor quarterback Sawyer Robertson, keeping drives alive, allowed the Bears to take the lead 31-27 late before, with 30 seconds left in regulation at the Baylor 29-yard line, Garrett Green hit Jaheim White down the left-hand sideline on a wheel route, wide open for the easy game-winning touchdown, giving West Virginia its 8th regular season win of the season, and then propelled them into the Duke's Mayo Bowl matchup against North Carolina. So talk about this year's matchup, what's on the line for both teams, and this is a pretty even matchup in the, whatever you want to call it, second or third tier cut of college football teams this year. So according to The Athletic, who ranks all FBS teams each week, who I've liked being able to talk about this for West Virginia's matchups, having not been in the top 25, but at least Baylor 43rd in the country, West Virginia 46th. So West Virginia moving up 16 spots, according to The Athletic. I know this, doesn't get any mention because they're not in the top 25, but moving up from 62nd prior to that Cincinnati contest and now 46th, according to The Athletic. This would be another marquee, a marquee win outside the top 25. West Virginia kind of alongside many of these programs who already have 4 losses on the season. Iowa, Nebraska is one. Looking at the rankings, I think Virginia Tech was just right in there previously, might now be lower because they lost last week to Clemson, but you kind of see where West Virginia is kind of on the outside looking in at the top 25, but inching closer with each win that it notches under its belt, trying to get now to 8 for the end of the regular season. And for West Virginia, I've listened to a couple of shows, read a couple of articles. It sounds like West Virginia needs to win out and receive some help, namely from the likes of Colorado and Kansas State, each each losing one more game at least to have the tie-breaking edge on second place in the Big 12 championship game to proverbially play BYU in this theoretical scenario in the conference championship game. I talked about how 2 weeks ago it was pretty much statistically impossible. Before last week's game, it was highly unlikely. Now West Virginia is hovering around like 8%, but it obviously includes winning out. So that's all that we care about at this point, striving toward that 8-win regular season mark. And at least for this game, you get to bowl eligibility with a win. So something I kind of forget about with all of the thoughts on the playoff and contending for conference championships and that much. So for Baylor started out this season 2-4 and looked to be going absolutely nowhere, losing to then ranked Utah, Colorado on the road, a ranked BYU, a ranked Iowa State on the road, before smacking Texas Tech in Lubbock by 24 points, scoring 59 on the day. Now, after home wins against Oklahoma State and TCU, a bye week last week, if Baylor can defeat West Virginia this week on the road, they are on the inside track toward wins at Houston, then home versus Kansas to finish 8-4. So to go from 2-4 and then win your final 6, that's saying something. That'd get Baylor, I feel like, to a pretty decent bowl game, finish in the top third of the Big 12 standings. Ultimately, I'd feel like that would save head coach Dave Aranda's job, he was among the top 5 head coach with the hottest hot seats going into the season. So taking a look around the Big 12 this week. So the other matchups, we got that Utah and Colorado on the road at Folsom Field. Utah coming off that heartbreaking loss to BYU last week, in which their athletic director pretty much just said, screw the Big 12, we hate your officiating. And as a West Virginia fan, I'm like, dude, hold my beer. Like, how much has West Virginia gone through with this conference for a dozen years now, with what it had to deal with TCU in 2014, and then Oklahoma and the blocking out of bounds in 2018. Like, Utah, take a chill pill. Relax. The Big Ten did not want you. Do you want to be in the resurrected Pac-12 or Mountain West? This is your best place to be. So you still have some, rival schools in your, southwestern Mountain West region, and now you're playing some pretty decent opponents. So calm down. You got to take on Colorado this week on the road. Hopefully Utah knocks them off. So knocks off Shedeur Sanders and Colorado, paving a way for West Virginia with continual wins, again, to get to that Big 12 championship game. Arizona State at Kansas State. I think this is a very interesting one. Cam Scatabo coming back. I love that guy. Hard runner for the Sun Devils. Hope they can knock off what would be an upset on the road and Manhattan, but I think Kansas State's the better team, having watched a lot of Arizona games, but also K-State games. Cincinnati on the road at Iowa State. Do they clean some things up from last week's loss to the Mountaineers and take down the Cyclones? Anything can happen. And then Kansas at BYU, Lavelle Edwards Stadium at night. I know Kansas just knocked off Iowa State last week in a game. I had no doubts that the Cyclones were going to pull that one out, but instead, Kansas seems really hot, locked and loaded. Can they take off 2 of the top teams in the standings in consecutive weeks? We'll see. But they look to be firing on all cylinders. Weather alert, the early forecast in this week looked like it would be a little bit warmer, but instead just 57 degrees the high. But hey, man, I guess you'll take that, almost 60, and we're nearly to Thanksgiving. Cloudy and 24% chance of rain. We'll see how that impacts things. The sun's starting to go down around 5:30. Here in, well, at least for me, southwestern Pennsylvania, directly north of Morgantown. So it will be, at least for, I would think, the second half, maybe even into the second quarter, considered a night game in Morgantown. So that'll be cool to see. But with that, the temperature, and we'll see if any precipitation plays any sort of a factor into this contest. From the injuries, it seems like it's been these 4 for the last consecutive weeks. Garrett Green, questionable. I am recording this video prior to the Neil Brown show at Kegler's. I usually like to record these post Neil Brown show, so that I kind of get word from the horse's mouth. It sounds like Mondays when you get like the post game evaluation on injuries, then Thursday night is the pre-game evaluation on injuries going into Saturday. You don't know the final details until just about kickoff, as I've said, about an hour before this contest. So we do not know as of yet, like right now, one way or another regarding Garrett Green. Another week without Aubrey Burks. I don't really want to continue to have to beat this drum. I talked about this, I think, a little bit longer than maybe I should have last week against Cincinnati, but it's really just a disappointing thing to not see Aubrey Burks out on the field. Don't know any more about that situation, kind of trying to talk to some people, and don't have any word on that, if it's injury related or something extracurricular, which I kind of alluded to a week ago. So I won't go there. Neither Jaden Bray, neither Aiden Garnes. So don't know what to say about those three guys on the defense, or three guys outside of Garrett Green, who Jaden Bray, Aiden Garnes do have another year's worth of eligibility, did come in through the transfer portal this offseason, and have really not really much made a mark on this program. So that's what I have to say about injuries. So let's get into the breakdown here. I feel like most important. What to watch for when Baylor has the ball. Since Toledo transfer quarterback Daquan Finn suffered a rib injury in week 2 versus Utah, and Baylor turned back to redshirt junior quarterback Sawyer Robertson, this Baylor offense has averaged 35 points per game, including efforts, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, 59 at Texas Tech a month ago, 38 points versus Oklahoma State 3 weeks ago, and then 37 points versus TCU 2 weeks ago. Former West Virginia offensive coordinator Jake Spavital really has this Baylor offense going, just a tenth of a point behind BYU for second in the Big 12 in scoring offense at 33.6 points per game. And it's come not by way of what you would traditionally think of as the Dana Holgorsen-esque air raid, or like we saw with Spavital when he was in Morgantown calling plays on Dana's behalf. Instead, Baylor's really went with a ground assault, and it's four guys who are making up this tank squad, led by redshirt freshman running back Bryson Washington, number 30. Just 96 carries on the season, but for 576 yards, that's 82 per game, and a 6 yards per carry average with 7 touchdowns. His 82 yards per game are good for 8th in the Big 12 Conference in rushing. He's coming off his best game as a Bear 2 weeks ago against TCU, 26 carries, 196 yards, 4 touchdowns, and also had 2 catches for 22 yards. He also had a 100-yard games against both Texas Tech and Air Force. 2 other backs who kind of make up the triumvirate is a guy two guys we've mentioned last year. Sophomore running back Dawson Pendergrass also has an over 6 yards per carry average, and Richard Reese, who we know had the 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns, so he can be dangerous, but really kind of fallen, it seems like, to third on the depth chart. Kind of took a step back, I feel like, last season from his freshman season where he was the feature back for Baylor's offense. Now he's in his junior year, stuck around, and he's only got 50 carries for the season, but still making the most of it. And also Sawyer Robertson is not a slouch in the rushing game. 48 carries for 257 yards and 4 touchdowns. We can remember last year he did have 15 rushes for the Bears in the contest against the Mountaineers for 58 yards. Now, he lost 25 of those because of sacks, but still, when he was able to escape the pocket, especially up the middle, he was able, and he's such a big-bodied guy that he can fall forward for extra yards. Oh, man, he's going to be a tough one to contain. And we remember last month when West Virginia had a triumvirate in Iowa State's running backs in Carson Hansen, Abu Sama III, and Jalen Jackson. How will West Virginia's front 6 respond when it has to go for 4 quarters against guys who will have relatively fresh legs coming off a bye? Especially after last week's physical contest against Cincinnati. As I mentioned in the postgame show, I thought West Virginia did a really good job at hitting Corey Kiner hard. really hard, forced the fumble on the rush play by Brendan Sorsby. I know he did have that rushing touchdown where he was like a whirling dervish falling forward for like 10 yards and scored a rushing touchdown. But I thought that the front six, front seven, however many you want to call it, did a really good job last week in just punishing ball carriers. Still gave up, over 100 yards rushing, but you'll take it for West Virginia at almost near the beginning of the fourth quarter, was going to go up 27-31-7, and like who cares at the end of the day really what those numbers were, but we know the history with the Cincinnati game. So let's talk about Robertson passing for a second before we talk about, and then some of these other pass catchers for Baylor before we talk about how the West Virginia defense will go at them. Just 59% completion percentage, 135 completions for 227 attempts, 1783 passing yards, does have 17 touchdowns through the air. That's a big number to just 4 interceptions, going along again with his 4 rushing touchdowns. So that's 21 touchdowns to just 4 picks. So on the per game average, he's averaging 223 passing yards, 32 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. That's pretty good numbers. You'll take that, especially what West Virginia's been getting out of the quarterback position for what it seems like this entire season. What I'll say about Robertson and watching some of Baylor's games this season, and I can remember back to last year, he really holds on to the ball a while. He likes to scramble around. He's not going to give up on a play, try and throw the ball out of bounds like Noah Fafita did in Arizona. He's going to hold on to it to his detriment sometimes. So can't give up on him. As I said at the end of the Cincinnati game, how many near sacks does Sean Martin have, it seems like, on this season? You cannot give up if you don't get to Robertson on the initial rush. Continue to make spin moves, swim moves, whatever you need to do to get away from the offensive lineman to come after Robertson. Same with you, Fatorma Mulba, TJ Jackson, whoever rushes after Robertson, he's going to want to hold on to the ball until he has absolute security that he's going to be throwing to a receiver that has a chance at making a play. I think he's trying to find one of his many pass catchers, and we'll talk about them. And Baylor's wide receivers and tight ends really are equally dangerous in their own way with yards after the catch on short yardage completions. I know watching the United Bank West Virginia Baylor preview that Neil Brown did with Tony Caridi yesterday, the couple of plays that I watched from that quick video were shot plays by Robertson, but that's not really necessarily what I feel like best describes this Baylor offense. It's surgical, quick passes that they use these wide receivers to try and run after the catch. Their team leader in catches, yards, and touchdowns, a guy we really didn't talk much about in this matchup a year ago, Josh Cameron, a redshirt junior, number 34, 6'1", 215. He's got 29 catches for 424 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's tied for third in the Big 12 Conference. And then it's kind of spread out evenly between Ashton Hawkins, Presley Howe, Michael Trigg, big tight end. But after how well West Virginia defended Royer from Cincinnati a week ago, I'm not really necessarily worried about Trigg and how he'll be defended in this game. Monterey Baldwin, I feel like he's been there 10 years. And Keytron Jackson Jr. the same difference. Big guy, 6'3", 205 in this contest. So I feel like this Baylor offense versus West Virginia's defensive battle could look a lot like how West Virginia defended against Kansas State. Trying to nickel and dime West Virginia up and down the field while they present what it seems like a tough running game. And I'd take DJ Giddens over any of the backs that Baylor has, but present this rushing ground assault, and and instead Baylor tries a nickel and dime you and passing all over you. So you have to watch when that shot play comes and voraciously tackle once again, which West Virginia has done such a good job. I feel like I'll beat that drum. I feel like whenever pass catchers catch the ball, they get tackled immediately. So great job by the defensive back so far this season. Continue to keep it up. It's where in coverage that they, things got better. Things were a lot better, I feel like, last week. Didn't give up any big shot plays. Xavier Henderson not making that big of a mark on the day. I feel like did give up the one on the wheel route, but I just think that was just a complete misassignment, completely on the defense, maybe on a linebacker. So do not give up the big play or limit those big plays on the day. Can't have the same kind of effort like we had when West Virginia was back at home against Kansas State. Has to be a better defensive effort for 4 quarters against Baylor. What I will say about Baylor when it plays in Morgantown, at least for these last 4 matchups, it gets funky with the turnovers, y'all. I was there in 2022. There were 3 of them. In 2020, Baylor had 2. 2018, there were 4. 2016, there were 4. So for whatever reason, there weren't any in 14 and 12. I looked that up as well. That's crazy. In that 63 game, there weren't any turnovers by Baylor in that contest. But again, last 4, they're averaging three plus turnovers per game. So Baylor might be sloppy. So I feel like for looking at it from 2 cents for West Virginia's defense, the rush defense and then the pass defense continue to hit these running backs hard, just like they did last week, giving up 157 yards on the ground. So just continue to hit them hard for 4 quarters. Don't let Robertson pick up those easy first downs on the ground, especially if he's trying to run forward. And I really liked that a lot of how interim defensive coordinator Jeff Coons called that game a week ago, sending the dogs at the right times from different angles, which I think you could definitely tell it was a different look and feel by this West Virginia defense last week comparatively to when Jordan Leslie was calling plays. Now, in the pass defense, I think getting another turnover or possibly 2 is going to be essential. You need that, especially against an high-powered offense like this Baylor team. And then just those few timely pass breakups, either in the red zone or on 3rd down, if this is going to end up being one of those close contests that we talk about between West Virginia and Baylor, but who knows? Could be a blowout. I don't know. I don't have a really great feel still right now going in this game. I still just feel uneasy about it. I don't know. Maybe that's just like my pre-games anxieties, but like I haven't felt this way about many I usually have a good feel, I feel like, going into games, win or lose. That's why I felt so confident last week against Cincinnati. This game, it's just so funky to pick West Virginia and Baylor, because like last year I was totally confident in that season finale and they almost blew it. So I don't know. Now let's talk about when West Virginia has the ball. So the WVU offense against Baylor's defense. Baylor's defense, just like last week in Cincinnati, facing a 3-3-5 scheme, and they're really nothing special defensively, like many of the defenses in the Big 12. 27 points per game allowed, 374 yards per game allowed. Like West Virginia, they're a little bit better at stopping the run than defending the pass. Baylor has the same number of sacks as West Virginia, 11 turnovers forced to West Virginia's 9 on the season. 3 guys I want to talk about, one having a West Virginia connection. Always seems like there's some sort of West Virginia connection. Number 2, 6th-year linebacker Mac Jones, 2nd in the Big 12 with 82 tackles on the season. Also has 8.5 tackles for loss, which are good for 8th in the Big 12, 3 sacks, 5 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. So he's the star linebacker for Baylor. And then right next to him is number 11, redshirt sophomore linebacker Keaton Thomas, who is a former West Virginia walk-on as part of like the Neil Brown-led program, but left the program now at Baylor. I know West Virginia tried to re-recruit him and he passed on the old gold and blue, instead going with the Bears. Now for this season, tied for 3rd in the Big 12 with 78 tackles on the season. Also has 4 tackles for loss, a sack, and an interception. And then in the back end, watch for number 24, redshirt sophomore safety Corey Gordon Jr. has a team-high 2 interceptions. So biggest question mark, I feel like, of this game is who starts at quarterback. Is it Nico Marchiol or Garrett Green? And again, as of this recording, I'm not listening to the Neil Brown weekly show to see if he, and I knowing how Neil Brown operates, he's going to want to play this close to the vest. He's not going to show his cards. He's going to let Baylor stew on it, whether they're facing Nico Marchiol or Garrett Green, all the way up until 3:50 p.m. on Saturday. So if I was hedging my bets, I'm going to go 60-40 Marchiol. It all kind of depends upon how did Garrett Green look in practice this week. Does he have any lasting symptoms? If this is, upper body could be anything. Upper body could be like chop me in half. Everything from like the neck up could be shoulder, could be elbow, could be neck, could be my skull. And in this case, I think like reading the tea leaves and what you can find online, it sounds like Garrett Green's still dealing with concussion symptoms, did travel with the team last week to Cincinnati, and kind of seeing him on the sidelines, looked in good spirits, pumping his teammates up. So, if he's feeling like, in his own decision-making, the WVU medical staff and Neil Brown, his family, whoever, he wants to play, that's on Neil Brown then to make that decision. Does he go with Nico Marchiol or Garrett Green? I'm not getting paid $4 million to make that decision. That's what Neil Brown's doing. But if I was a betting man on this decision, I feel like he's going to go with Nico Marchiol over Garrett Green. But it all kind of depends upon how practice went this week. So that's kind of why I wanted to hear this show impacting this video. But, we'll see come Saturday who it is. So, and again, West Virginia coming off arguably its worst offensive performance of the season last week versus Cincinnati. 17 offensive points, just 248 total yards, and just 10 first downs on the game. And we haven't seen Garrett Green since the first half of the Kansas State game a month ago. And in that game, he was just 9 of 19 for 85 yards passing with a touchdown, but 2 interceptions, one of them being that pick six that I kind of went irate about on my recap video. Did have 89 yards rushing on 11 carries, trying to do it for him, do everything by himself, Superman, in that second quarter of that Kansas State game. But what I will say about the West Virginia offense to kind of go put a pin in the quarterback debate, West Virginia has to get back to running the ball better. And I know, I talk so much about going up tempo and throwing the ball downfield, but man, I ran the numbers on this, and excluding Jaheim White's 55-yard run off the jet sweep down the right-hand sideline in that Arizona game, West Virginia is only averaging 3.8 yards per carry. So that my numbers check out on that. 540 rushing yards on 142 carries. That's just not good enough for over the last 4 games, dating back to Oklahoma State when West Virginia ran for 400 or something. I know they faced some pretty stout defenses during that point in time, but they're just not running the ball as well. And I don't know whether and I know they're just getting Wyatt Milam back from injury a week ago. He'd been out for some time. I just don't know if it's something. I really do. I think what it is there's just like the first 6 games of 2023, which I talked about, I feel during the time, all off season and so on, but I'll come back to it. Is there so much pressure in the box that you have to be able to open up the field to be able to run, using the pass to work in the run to have more success. The opposing defenses are just keying on West Virginia's running backs, trying to sell out to stop the run and forcing him, okay, well, make Nico Marchiol beat us. This is how we're going to present to you. We're going to shut down your greatest asset, try and beat us with your what may be your weakest link. But man, I don't know whether I've read some articles this week, unfortunately, where's CJ Donaldson? Why does it look like he's regressing? I've talked about Jaheim White, kind of running just about even or maybe just short of where his yards for the season were a year ago. So not necessarily a sophomore slump, but again, not, taking a step further. And then again, how the way the carries are being spread is, Jaheim White getting more carries, taking away from Donaldson and his ability to get better as the game goes along, more of a volume guy. And why is C.J. Donaldson being run east and west, trying to run off tackle or to the outside, and Jaheim White being run up the middle when it feels like it should be the opposite? Like, that would be the greatest strength. So all comes back to coaching, all comes back to this incompetent head coach who's calling plays offensively, and why I feel like he's just been they've already made the decision on firing Jordan Leslie, and it seems like that's made a bit of an improvement. Firing the offensive coordinator, who is also the head coach, would I feel like be an improvement because of how stagnant this offense has been for this entire season. But I digress. I know that we're dealing with like a $10 million or more buyout, and that's just incomprehensible for West Virginia's administration to be able to pay, with all of the house settlement coming down and where West Virginia is at in revenue. And okay, I'll stop. But okay, back to the West Virginia offense. So the way to take pressure out of the box and throw the ball downfield, I'm going to be very curious to see if Hudson Clement is healthy and ready to rock and roll. I think West Virginia desperately missed him last week against Cincinnati. And because we don't have injury reports in college football, kind of was just like a sneaky, thing where you saw shots of him over on the sidelines in street clothes, and you're like, what the heck? Whoa, why isn't Hudson Clement out there? So really noticed his absence, it felt like. Will being at home as opposed to being on the road give Neil Brown greater confidence to let Nico Marchiol or Garrett Green rip it downfield? That's going to be the biggest question, because obviously not last week against Cincinnati for whatever reason. But also, can these wide receivers, tight ends, and even running backs create separation? And if not, will Neil Brown call plays that let pass catchers run with it after the catch? That's what West Virginia hasn't done enough of, in my opinion, this season, and would have been very successful to do last week against Cincinnati. So I'm looking at you, Traylon Ray. I'm looking at you, Justin Robinson. Can you make big splashes in this game? West Virginia is going to have to score points. It can't score just 17 points and win this game. Like, this is where I get in these debates. About a month or so ago, with another content creator on Twitter about, in the name of complimentary football. No, this is still the Big 12 conference. You still have to score into the 30s. And West Virginia now on the season is just averaging a tick under 30, where they were at, last year. I thought they would be closer to 40. So can this be a prove-it game at home, again, against a Baylor opponent that you've had major success in the final, results of the game in Morgantown? Looking at the special teams battle, wow. A lot you can say about this Baylor special teams unit as a whole. First and foremost, punter sophomore Palmer Williams, 32 punts, 51-yard average that leads the nation, long of 79. These are unreal numbers. 18 punts of 50 yards or more and 11 inside the 20. I feel like he's got to be the leader in the clubhouse for the Ray Guy Award nationally. On the other side for Ollie Straw, I think he did a really good job last week against Cincinnati. Awesome by Ollie. He had 5 punts. 3 of them were inside the Cincinnati 20 with a long of 46 on the day. So could be a potential punter's battle between the two. Unfortunately, Williams not from Australia, so I love those Australian matchups. In the returns unit, I thought Preston Fox, and I said in the recap against Cincinnati, was awesome. One of the unsung heroes of that game. Would want to be one of my stars of the game if we were using hockey terms. 3 returns on the punt return last week, had his season long of 29 yards, had 3 returns on the kickoff unit, had a season long 43-yard return. So look for Preston Fox to do damage once again. And then 2 guys you got to talk about for Baylor, Josh Cameron in the punt return unit, second in the nation with a 20 yards per return average on 14 returns, does have a 79-yard return on the season. So got to watch out for Josh Cameron. And then on the kickoff unit, number 20, redshirt senior Jamal Bell, 14 returns for a 25-yard average. That's a good average. Does have a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown at Colorado this season. In the kicking game, I think West Virginia has the edge. Michael Hayes hitting a 24-yard field goal was perfect, 4 for 4 on points after a week ago, going against Isaiah Hankins, who's 10 of 13 on his field goals, does have a long of 51. He did miss a point after 2 weeks ago against TCU, now 31 of 32 on the season. Let me give you my 3 keys to victory, and then I'll get you out with a prediction. So I already kind of alluded to this with the turnover numbers from Baylor whenever they play in Morgantown. Avoid sloppiness. That's my number one. Turnovers. And Baylor is 115th in the nation in penalty yards per game at 67, whereas West Virginia's 5th, one of the fewest penalized teams in the country. I know had some issues earlier in the season, it looked, in September, but now they've really cleaned things up. It seems like only 32 yards per game in penalty yardage. So if Baylor's going to want to come out here and be chippy, if they're going to want to, think that they're already playing in a Big 12 championship game by playing this one in Morgantown, just do not reciprocate that. Do not get penalized. Don't let them get old Art Briles coach teams. I feel like that was a different story with Baylor. That was a different story. Now, under Dave Aranda, I don't get that sense, so it might just be, procedural things, trying to go too fast at times, but also they've turned the ball over historically for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the beds sleeping in Morgantown the night before and then coming out there and they're off, or something's in the water, the Gatorade, I don't know, but for whatever reason, the Bears don't play well in Morgantown. So avoid sloppiness, don't play down to that level if Baylor has some just off moments in this game. So just continue to take it to them, especially defensively. I know this is kind of cliche, but just the defense has got to bring it. I feel like they really gave it their all last week against Cincinnati. Again, saved the game with 2 turnovers for touchdowns. The Anthony Wilson interception return for a touchdown, and then Tyron Bradley's fumble recovery for a touchdown. And I know they're missing Aubrey Burks. They're missing arguably their best defender, and he's AWOL. If it's because of injuries or something else, again, I don't know. But having him not out there, now Kokora Tarnu's had to step up, which increases playing time opportunities for some of the young guys in the secondary, Zay Jennings being one of them. And then Anthony Wilson's really been an enforcer. I think Fatorma Mulba's been awesome this year. TJ Jackson continually, I feel like Big 12 newcomer of the year should be. And then on the opposite side, Sean Martin. So linebacking core, pretty relatively healthy. Corners and safeties, So just bring it for 4 quarters against, again, a Baylor offense that's been averaging 35 points per game over the last 6 games. Thirdly, third key point, run the ball if you're afraid of your passing game. Baylor's 128th in the nation out of 133 teams in average time of possession at just 26 minutes per game. If WVU can get Baylor's offense off the field on consecutive series or more, or if they force a turnover, they can dominate time of possession in this contest if they run the ball effectively. And that's when I feel like West Virginia's chances can precipitously increase of winning this game. I know I really don't like those kind of Iowa State type of games where it comes down to possessions. It's like a possession game, 8 or 9 possessions, using so much clock, stuff like that. But at this point in time of the season, we're talking about, this will be their 10th game. Their 10th game here. Style points are out the window. Style points, stats, preseason expectations, all of that jazz are completely out the window to me. Like, this team is what it is at this point. And now all I care about are wins. I don't care about I don't really care about how they win at this point in time, just the simple matter of fact that they do win. And we can say what we want about the offense. We can say what we want about the defense this season. I think I got to get this quote. It's such a funny quote. that, like, I bet Neil Brown, whenever he said it, thought that, like, oh, I'm being open and honest and it sounds interesting, but we haven't had a game yet where all three played, all three phases. If we can play at a high level in all three phases, we can definitely be one of the better teams in the league. In 37 words, Neil Brown just said, we're mediocre. So it proved me wrong. As a fan, as someone who loves this team, eats, sleeps, breathes West Virginia, creates this channel wanting to talk about football, like, that is the perception. And the numbers all kind of back it up, and it's unfortunate for these players to have to hear that, because unfortunately I feel like this head coach is holding them back. The defensive coordinator was previously holding this defense back. So now go out there, give it your all. You have 2 home games left. True Blue next week against Cincinnati. I'm sorry, but they played really well in the military appreciation game a year ago against BYU, a game that I got to go to, and there's still actually something to play for. If you get to 8 wins, I know it's still an 8-4 record. It's not pretty by any stretch of the imagination. It's not like we're talking like West Virginia's Texas or West Virginia's Ohio State or West Virginia's Oregon here. And they're talking about their aspirations of, like, college football playoff seeding and hosting home games and all that jazz. Like, no, West Virginia unfortunately isn't at that. But every win that it continues to stack gets closer and closer to a top 25 ranking. Once again, could get to another Duke's Mayo Bowl, for example. And if things fall your way and you continue to win, Colorado, Kansas State in front of you, who knows? Maybe we have a 2007-like year where some people just fall by the wayside. West Virginia is able to sneak in, upset BYU in a Big 12 championship game. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but you get what I'm saying, is there is still something to play for. It's not the time to start, thinking ahead, giving up, transfer portal, where am I going for, some of these players whose headspace might be like not 100% focused on this year and on this team right now. But for the most part, and like West Virginia has a good core, I feel like, of starters who have really given it their all in these last couple of weeks on the road, still playing for each other, still playing for their head coach, still playing for this state, still playing for this program. Go out there and give it. So I'd love to see it, and I hope West Virginia pulls it out. I'm going to say they are. I'm going to say they do. 6-3 now on my picks on the season. Last and my preseason prediction, I thought West Virginia could win this easily because I didn't think Baylor was going to be this good. But Jake Spavital really helping out this offense. I thought it was going to be like a 42-21 game, and West Virginia's offense would be roaring at this point in time in the season. Instead, I'm going to say it's a close one. I'm going to say it's another one of those games that are decided by fewer than 7 points. 38-34 Mountaineers. So, another one. A lot to unpack there in that game, so love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear your comments, good, bad, or indifferent. Offense, defense, special teams. What are your keys to victory? How do you see this one going? Love to know your thoughts. Please like this video so more Mountaineer fans can see it around YouTube. Love to have you a subscriber to my channel, and I'll bring you the recap of this game on Sunday. Good, bad, or indifferent. Win, lose. There's no ties in college football, so I'll be back on Sunday to talk about it. And yeah, if you're attending this game in person, hope you're excited for it. Have a great time in the tailgating. Have a lot of fun. And then hopefully West Virginia can pull it out with a victory for you. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.